Well, welcome back to another one of my monthly image reviews. This time we'll be looking back at a small selection of images that I made during June. Some of them you'll have seen already if you follow my vlogs from the field. Others are perhaps ones that you haven't seen. So without further ado, let's jump straight over to the screen and look at our first image. So this was an image made not long after lockdown restrictions really started to ease, and it's an image made about 500 meters from my front door. It was a beautiful sort of warm sort of summer's evening, and there was a first swell flowing below, and I really wanted to accentuate or show the sort of textures that the evening sun was bringing. But there's a couple of things that bother me a little bit with the image. Firstly, I think maybe the white balance is a little bit off. So if I just compare this with the as shot, so this on the right hand side is the as shot white balance, and I think somewhere in between, I think I've gone just a little bit too warm on the left hand side frame. So I would probably try to, if and when I go back to reprocessing this, I would most likely look to sort of cool it down just a touch. The other thing that I kind of I'm a bit disappointed in is just this very bright patch up here. Now for sure I could go ahead and add a, you can see here, I know you can't see on the screen, but just adding a targeted adjustment and just reducing the exposure just a touch. The actual wave itself isn't overexposed, but your eye is immediately drawn up rather than maybe being drawn sort of around. It's actually being drawn, I feel anyway, up to the brightest part of the image. So I would actually just reduce the a bit more sort of subtly than what I'm doing here, and I'm just using the targeted adjustment just to reduce that just a little bit. And you can see as well when I do that, you start to see some of those sort of tones, golden tones, kind of coming through. So I think there's work to do from a processing point of view to actually get this a little bit closer to what I'd be happy with. And just as a side note to that, this is quite often what I will do with my images. There will be a first edit, and that first edit quite often then will sit on my drive for a while. There may be sort of some tweaks made to that, and then I'll maybe post that on social media, do whatever. I'm very careful not to add that to my print store or anything like that. I don't mind sharing it online. But then several months later, I'll come back to it with fresh eyes and just make another edit. Now sometimes those follow-up edits several months later are very small, subtle things. I've printed that image out, I've had it on my wall, whatever, and then I'll make some subtle adjustments. Sometimes, however, as will be the case here, there'll actually be more than just subtle adjustments. I'll actually be doing some sort of major work. I may even reset the edit completely and go back to the drawing board. And so that's typically what I'm doing, and so that's why I find these sort of review sessions useful from my own perspective, because it's allowing me to go back in and say, Nigel, you could probably do a little bit better there. So there you go. So yeah, that's image one. So this is an image that I'm not going to kind of dwell on too long, mainly because I absolutely hate it. It was a beautiful evening again. This was a couple of days later. We had a real stretch of lovely sort of calm, sunny summer's evenings. And in the field, it seemed like everything was coming together. We had a lovely sort of sunset, lovely sort of still fresh thrift on the headland. A lovely bit of sort of rock textures, and everything just seemed fine. Now, I ended up shooting, this is a bracketed shot, and when I got it back into the computer and started working on the processing, I just thought, this is not the type of images that I enjoy making. And I think one thing that I've learned over the last kind of couple of years is I'm not sure I enjoy shooting into the sun. I've got one or two images that maybe pass the test, but generally I just don't enjoy it. And in fact, if you look across a number of the masters out there, landscape photography masters, very rarely will they include the sun in their image. And I just think that when I kind of am shooting into the sun, don't get me wrong, there is still some beautiful images out there, but I just don't get anything from it really. Now there's a lot else going on with this image. I don't think I've done too great with the processing. I certainly don't, there's a lot of maybe a little bit of a burnt out area here. I don't like the cruff down at the bottom left hand corner. Maybe a little bit too dark in here. So the processing side of things isn't really great. But what it did do, it really sort of hit me. What sort of images am I really wanting to produce in the field? Which images are actually making me happiest? And I don't think it's going to be images such as this, or at least, I'm going to be very picky going forward, the types of images that I'm going to be making where you're shooting sort of into the sun, the bright, bold type images, because in all honesty, when I get them home, I kind of either delete them or they just sit on my hard drive. So at the very least, this was a good exercise in telling me what I didn't like. However, this image is one that I really, really like. I had a couple of evenings along at White Rocks Beach where and again, I think there's a couple of these images that have appeared in various vlogs, and I loved this. I loved the textures in the sand. I loved the little sort of stripes of sunlight as the wave was coming in, and just playing a little bit about with the shutter speed. This was shot at half a second using a Format Hi-Tech 4-stop ND filter. And as I say, I really like it. Now, I think the only edits that I've done to this have been slightly warming up the tones and also mainly on the crop. So this is the 3x2 out of camera. I think I've mentioned this a couple of times. Kind of not a huge fan of that 3x2. I really wish Fujifilm would bring out a 4x3 or a 5x7 crop overlay, so I could actually get a little bit closer to that in the field. But I just think that I don't mind. I think the long and narrow sort of, I'm not sure this area works as well. Maybe it does looking back on it now, but I just think the slightly cropping in, you can see that I've kind of slightly warmed up the tones as well. But this is an image that, compared to the previous one, this is certainly an image that's is closer to the sorts of images that I really, really love to see and capture in the field. So these next three images, I'm not sure I've published them. Well, I've certainly not published them in their current format, and they're not really images that I think work, but I really wanted to just show them here just to highlight a particular point. Now, in the field, my eye was kind of focused on how the wave was sweeping around this rock, and you can kind of see that in a couple of these particular images. But when I got it back into the digital darkroom, I don't think the rock really works. What does work, however, is this sweeping line around the rocks. Now, I'm at 32mm here on the 18-135. Obviously, I've already cropped this down. You can see that that's the original 3x2 format. And you can see kind of what I was maybe trying, the waves sort of sweeping around this rock. What I really, really wish I'd seen in the field was just this section. Now, this is a pretty serious crop in, so it probably won't really make anything, and it certainly doesn't make anything with that almost 16:9 vertical. But I just love how the waves are kind of flowing around, and I really, really wish that I had seen, rather than focusing on the keeping the rock, which I just don't think works at all, I really wish that I had seen this in the field. And this is one of the benefits of really looking back at the images, admitting where you've made a mistake, and really it just sort of then highlights, look Nigel, next time you're out and you're looking at this here, there's no need to kind of include something like this. Look at what the most interesting part of the frame is, and is there a way just to focus in on that? And I really wish that I had almost just kind of focused on this here, this area here. Lesson learned. In fact, what I did do was I ended up, I think on Instagram, and I'll throw that frame up now. I ended up zooming in Instagram on that area and kind of turning it into a sort of a panoramic. Again, not huge quality because we're doing quite a major crop here, but lesson learned. So again, another image from either that particular evening or the evening after. And this again is an image that, this doesn't happen that often. An image that I really liked in camera, and one that I've continued to like several months later. I just love the transition from the wave, and the fact that there is that low sort of direction of the sun, creating these sort of streaks of light almost through. If there's obviously a piece of rubbish in the field or something, I'll pick that up and take it away with me. But I'm not one for positioning elements. We're coming into the unnatural leaf position photography season, as I like to call it, i.e. someone will go find a really lovely big sort of leaf and place it bang on this sort of rock and get low down. Each to their own. I put a blog post up on this here. Whatever makes you happy, just do it. But for me, I'm not one for gardening. And so this bit of kelp here, this bit of seaweed, spaghetti seaweed is it called? Probably not, but we'll just call it spaghetti seaweed, spaghetti weed. This was positioned just like that. Now, once this frame had gone, the wave coming through, the bit of seaweed actually ended up getting pushed to one side, and then the very next wave came along and actually moved the rocks as well. But I really, really love this. Now, again, it's not crop. This is actually the original format as well, I believe. Yep. It's not quite center, and that kind of bothers me just a little. I would love to have just had just a touch more space on this left hand side. But I think what works with this particular composition is the fact that we do have that wave sort of coming in for the top left hand corner. And of course, if I had have moved myself a bit more to the left to center the bottom objects, the bottom stones, then we might have had a little bit more of a gap up here. But that's probably the only thing. And this was certainly my favorite image from the month. I just love those light streaks, and just how that bit of spaghetti weed is over the front of the rocks. And then the final image in this little mini review, as I say, I'm trying to keep things pretty short, is another beautiful evening, really fantastic conditions from, again, white rocks. And again, this was an image that has remained sort of, I quite like it, but it's not without its flaws. Not least, this is actually a 16:9 crop from the original file. Probably could have got away with, or I probably should have thought about doing this in a vertical pano. The light was changing reasonably fast, and of course I am using a longer exposure here with a 4-stop, I believe, a 4-stop ND. So maybe with a pano it may have been difficult to kind of line all those up and get a clean panoramic, but I wish I'd at least tried to sort of have this same aspect ratio, but with a panoramic with 3 or 4 images stitched together. The bottom right hand corner is probably a little bit too bright. If I was going back in to edit this, I would probably drop in again another focused adjustment. Just drop the exposure just a touch. May even consider dropping the saturation just a little bit. You see there, dropping that saturation actually pulls the eye away from it. Speaking of saturation, the conditions were incredible. Perhaps I've gone just a touch over. And so again, if I was doing a re-edit on this, which I most likely will, I would probably just take 5% of the saturation out of this particular image. But it is an image that I still quite enjoy. I love the sort of the storm, sort of purpley clouds with that lovely golden tones on those white rocks. And we have just a little bit of a sneak peek of Dunluce Castle, and in fact lovely light on the Giant's Causeway as well. I was very in the field when I was actually composing this. I made sure that I was composing it with the top right hand side of the cliff face coming out of the exact top right hand side of the frame. Sometimes I feel that if I do that, which I have done here very precisely, it almost feels a little bit forced, and so I'm kind of starting to sort of let that go a little bit, where it doesn't have to be right bang right up in the top right hand corner, but just somewhere up in the top right hand corner that's actually sort of flow in one of the corners, flowing down into the image. But an image that I'll probably go back at some point and rework from a processing point of view. Kind of wish I'd done a 3 or 4 vertical panoramic here, just to give me a slightly bigger file to play with. So there you go, a little sort of mini review of some of the images made in June. I think that one of the things that I'm enjoying about doing this here is picking up the flaws in the images. And again, it's just personally from my perspective, I think this is how we sort of teach ourselves, and we sort of learn from our mistakes by going back and really looking closer at the images, both from a composition point of view and also from a processing point of view as well. So hope you've enjoyed this little Talk Tuesdays and my June review. Hopefully, what are we now? This is going out early September, so who knows when we'll get July's review up. But what I'm trying to do is give it enough space between me making the images and me reviewing them, because I am actually reviewing these as I normally would do, sort of a couple of months after I've actually sort of done the done the processing. So, and of course, as always, if there's anything that you see in the images that you think, well, actually maybe you could have done this better, or I agree or don't agree with my sort of summary, then please put those in the comments below. Always useful to hear from you. But for now, I shall take my leave, and we shall catch up on Sunday from somewhere in the field. Alright guys, until next time, take care, bye bye.